Pet's Executive Director of the Australian Chamber of Commerce in South Korea. In celebrating 60 years of diplomatic relations between Australia and Korea, it is my pleasure to be hosting today's exciting webinar, Tech and Innovation in Korea, Insights for Global Companies Interested in the Korean Market. Today, we'll be joined by three expert speakers sharing insights into the subject, and I'm very pleased to be welcoming AustCham Korea's board member and co-founder of JOST & Co, Joe Billing, who will join me on screen as the moderator of today's event. Welcome, Joe, and I'm going to leave it over to you to make the further introductions. Great.
Thank you, Rowan. And being a business founder myself and also a digital nomad working remotely for the last 2.5 or more years, the theme of today's event struck quite a particular chord with me. I suppose tech savvy and notoriously fast paced, South Korea is an exciting and dynamic place to live and do business. I guess it's also notable that Korea's status as a leader in tech and innovation is renowned worldwide, as we saw in Korea's ranking in the 2021 Bloomberg Innovation Index. They topped the list as the #1 most innovative economy in the world. But I suppose this enthusiasm and excitement is also tempered by a complexity that one is sure to face in navigating any new market. And Korea is filled with its own unique challenges that both individuals and businesses can probably agree with, that we need to figure out how to overcome in order to succeed in this market. As Rowan mentioned, we'll be joined by three experts today who will share their insights into how businesses and individuals can leverage different strategies to succeed in the Korean market. One that actually happens to be Australia's 4th largest export market at the moment. So our speakers today are Craig Goldblatt, who's the VP of Partners and Alliances at Globalization Partners. He'll be discussing agility in complexity, how remote work technology can bridge the gap. Then we'll have Sokjin Chang, Director of International Cooperation at Born to Global Centre. He'll be discussing technology innovation ecosystem in Korea. And then William Choi is the founder at Posture 360, and he'll be sharing insights into the company's experience of expanding into the Korean market. I'm sure you'll agree, a really great panel of people to speak to us today in what's happening in this tech and innovation space. So to kick things off, I'll stop talking now, and it's my pleasure to welcome a fellow Melburnian into the presentation, which is Craig Goldblatt. He's the Vice President, as I mentioned, of Partners and Alliances for Globalization Partners business in Asia Pacific. In this capacity, he's responsible for ANZ Partnership Initiative, as well as helping the company to drive APAC-wide partnerships. Prior to this role, he was with ADP for 7 years, where he reshaped the business and developed a strategy for growth, having been awarded with 2 President's Club, 1 Board of Directors and 1 Superstars. He has vast experience in the areas of business management, sales, operations, software development, project management, IT outsourcing and service leadership. He's been a very busy man over the last couple of decades, and primarily his industry focus have been BPO services, software, cloud software, banking and finance. So over to you, Craig, to share some of your learnings and knowledge and insights with us. Thank you very much.
Well, it was quite a mouthful there, Joe. Thank you very, very much, and very much appreciate that introduction. And I'm super excited to kick off first here, and hopefully can provide some useful insights to everyone on the session. Joe, just to confirm that you can see my screen. There's no problem there.
We can see it. All good. Thanks, Craig.
Okay, happy to go. So. Firstly, I'd like to just put my horrible face over there, apologies, but also to introduce Josh Kim, who is a partner manager, sole-based for Globalization Partners and one of my esteemed colleagues, frankly. And so you guys will get this presentation. If you want to connect with either of us, please feel free to do that going forward. When we look at South Korea from our perspective at Globalization Partners, we see an incredible land of opportunity, and from the Australian perspective, looking out, the same. A population of 51 million people that actually has this huge GDP, 1.62 trillion US dollars, a highly open, tech-savvy, capable workforce with increasingly tech-savvy students coming out and flowing into the economy, a large economy and a huge or very strong partner to Australia. And that was shown by CAFTA, the free trade agreement that was signed between Australia and South Korea in 2014. So South Korea features as the top 20 countries for expansion within the top 20 countries for expansion for Australian businesses, coming in at 9th place and has over 8% of Australian companies who've gone or globally or outside the country. A highly innovative place, as I say, and in addition to that, it absolutely represents one of the easiest economies in terms of its friendliness towards business coming in. And we'll talk about some of the barriers in a minute, but South Korea presents a fantastic opportunity and is keen to present businesses coming into that market. So having said that and seen the opportunity, what are the biggest pain points that are facing companies as they enter the South Korean market? Well, frankly, for Australian-based companies looking to expand into South Korea for the first time, there are complexities that need to be expected, and one needs to know how to actually present in the appropriate way, if you like. So we found that 86% in a research paper that Globalization Partners did with CFO research, that 86% of recipients, CFOs, actually said that global expansion would take at least 5 months, and almost half of them said it would take up to a year to actually establish an entity inside Korea. So these lengthy times are one of the barriers. But frankly, the other key barriers that we see in papers that are brought forward from within Korea and outside are the following. Language, accessibility to funding opportunities locally, the lack of knowledge of the local tax laws, difficulty in finding partners and team members inside Korea, and then finally the complexity of the visa system. So across all those items, and those are in priority order, I would say that accessing that knowledge and being able to get through the language barriers are some of the major impediments to get through to that growth opportunity for Australian businesses looking to enter that market. But I suppose we present options to get around that and to get around that fast. So welcome to the era of borderless hiring, where expansion and growth are not only about increasing your market share or diversifying investment, but it's about getting the best person for the role, no matter where they live. And in this case, being able to actually land and expand inside the Korean marketplace without having to actually necessarily travel and spend enormous amounts of time and money to establish those entities within that market. Currently, Australia is facing an incredible talent shortage. I mean, it's something that has been acknowledged both by government and industry inside Australia. PwC and the World Economic Forum have found that if we don't close the gap in this that skills gap in this next decade, the 2020s, we'll actually forego some $90 billion of potential growth to the Australian economy because of that lack of skill. And South Korea provides a host of opportunities for business in terms of identifying new business, but also new skill and skills within that market to be able to support Australian businesses going forward. So the idea of that tranche, if you like, of increasing your market share, diversifying investments, and getting the best person for the role, no matter where they live, is where Globalization Partners, and frankly where businesses can now look to in terms of how we can go about expanding into a country. No more is it a requirement that you have to land, set up all your entity, your legal entities and so on, and wait that time before you hire one person. So if that sounds a little fanciful, let's tell you actually how that works. How do you actually deliver some level of frictionless landing? Maybe frictionless is a little overstated there, but very easy landing into South Korea before you have to go through the entire investment of setting up entities and establishing yourself. So first, what makes up a world-class platform and separates Globalization Partners from other employer of record solutions. And if I define an employer of record solution, it is a company that can hire on behalf of a client. Essentially what we do is we have entities in the Korean market, in the country and in countries right around the world. And we hire employees on behalf of our clients and then assign their time to those clients. So we have entities in over 52 countries around the world and of course in South Korea. That idea of having those worldwide entities is a really important point in this establishment of an employer of record, because you then have the comfort that you're actually contracting with a company that has contracted directly with that employee rather than a third party. The second point is that we establish in-house expertise in the countries that we are domiciled, including South Korea. So we have in-house HR and other logistics support so that we provide local compliance solutions for those employees that we've hired. Thirdly, our company is highly profitable, and in early 2020 received a $150 million minority investment. By this year, we will have hit $1 billion of recurring revenue through the company in the 9 years that Globalization Partners has existed. Quite impressive. And then finally, but very, very much not least, we established this under a technology, a SaaS-based technology platform, which allows companies to literally dial up compliant contracts, establishing in minutes what benefits they want to provide to a potential employee, a compliant employment contract, so that can be presented by Globalization Partners, signed electronically, and start the person very, very quickly. All of this is wrapped in incredibly high care at 97+% client satisfaction, both for our professionals, our employees, as well as the clients that we employ for. We provide incredible care for the employees and allow then companies to hire with real confidence into that market. So you might ask, so how are we going in South Korea? Well, already we actually have over 100 South Korean-based professionals that we've hired into the market. And breaking that down, they are, and I imagine this is not a huge surprise for many of the people on the call, but 38% are in software, 18% in the manufacturing area, online services at 6%, and then some notable items within the others area are biotech and consulting services. So already we have established 100 professionals into that market. Typically, that can comprise where Australian businesses are hiring for talent in another market like South Korea, or just as typically where companies, Australian companies, for example, are going and looking to establish in the South Korean market, but want to get there fast and want to get there compliantly. So we can actually establish or overcome those barriers for you in terms of setting up entities, etc., by hiring and getting you started. And then if that establishes and goes well, you can land and expand, set up your entity, and then we will transfer those employees over to the local entity. So just to recap a little bit about what I've said, is essentially our full stack solution allows you to find the employee, the candidate that they're looking for. We can provide some support for that through our partners if required. We can hire them in the market in minutes, allowing you to establish, having allowed you to establish what benefits you want to provide to that employee, whether it's optional or required benefits. In addition to that, we complete and take responsibility for all the employment-related requirements for that employee, from onboarding right through to termination. So we carefully onboard your candidate, we take them through the process, we make sure that they're comfortable, and then assign them to you so that they work through your systems, get your email address, etc., so that they can be established inside your business. As I said, we take that responsibility very, very seriously and care for those employees as well as you would care for them in your organisation, because we see ourselves as a true partnerships. And you get local presence very fast and very effectively. So an example of this is Fusion Sport, Carl Wood. You can read the comment there in terms of his entry into the market. But these are the sorts of companies where they're looking to accelerate their expansion. It's a great use case in terms of using our services to establish a market in multiple countries around the world. If you're wondering, we'll actually cover 187 countries around the world, and clearly, obviously, South Korea. So just finally speaking, if you go to our globalizationpartners.com website, you'll find a number of items there that may be of use and helpful for you as you're looking through possibly entering this market in South Korea. The first thing I'll point you to is something called the Global Pedia. A bit of a daggy name, I'd accept, but essentially you can go in there and find out some specifics about over 150 countries we've got documented in this repository, including South Korea, and you can find details about what it means to establish yourself in that market, what compliance means, what holidays are required, when you need to pay bonuses, etc., etc. So please go ahead and avail yourself of that. The other thing is, if you would like, please feel free to click on this little button here, and we'll come and actually give you a live demonstration of our platform. And if you're interested in the features, and come and chat to us and see if we can assist you. So hopefully that was a helpful presentation, and I look forward to the Q&A a little bit later. Joe, I'll pass back to you, and hopefully it's in the right time frame.
Great. Thank you, Craig. I'm not keeping time, but I'm sure someone is, and you would have known if you'd gone over. Anyway, so now I'd like to welcome Sokjin, and I know he's been all over the Korean Peninsula today, so I'm glad that he managed to dial in. Sokjin, welcome. So I'd love to introduce him at the moment. He's the Director of International Cooperation at Born to Global Centre, which is the Korean government's global startup incubation and acceleration agency that sits under the Ministry of Science and ICT. Before he started in this exciting role, he worked primarily in the Korean government sector, including the Ministry of Planning and Budget, the Ministry of Economic and Finance, the Presidential Council on National Competitiveness. Done a lot of things in the Korean government. He also served as the advisor to the chairman of the Korea Development Bank, and he's got experience in global investment fund management. His career has been focused on international cooperation, development assistance, and capacity building for developing economies. And we're really excited to have him here to give us a bit more insight into the innovation and the ecosystem here and some of the startup stuff he's been doing. So welcome, Sokjin, and thank you for making it today.
Thank you very much, Joe. Such a big privilege to be representing Born to Global Center. Of course, my thanks to, of course, the Australian Chamber of Commerce, for giving us this opportunity and to talk about the Korean tech ecosystem. Also, my compliments to Craig and our very good friend William for participating in this event as well. So without further ado, let me share my screen with the participants and see if I can hopefully introduce in the next 10-15 minutes the ecosystem here for technology innovation, for entrepreneurship, and obviously market entry into Korea, which I'm going to be here to understand and to get more insight. So let me begin a little bit by talking about the Korean startup ecosystem, because I know that a lot of participants here today are startups or are entering the Korean market. Well, as we know, and as many of you know, also we have been in the top spots in the Bloomberg Index, in the World Bank Group's Doing Business, the Global Entrepreneurship Winder, and so on. And we are very high along with Australia and other partners. We think that that's probably because of the high intensity in R&D and, of course, the ICT infrastructure we have been over the years. But another key interesting aspect is the continued government support programs for deep tech startup enterprises here. As many of you know, Korea has developed very rapidly over the past decades, and one of the key players has been the public sector or the government sector. And even now, we have seen, for example, last year is 4.6% increase, but over 1.3 billion US dollars in the support for the growth of entrepreneurship and startups here in Korea. Most of them focused on commercialization, R&D, facility and space, and other areas. Another more interesting, I think, aspect, especially for companies that are looking to enter into the Asian market through Korea as a landing pad, would be the growth in the venture capital market. As large as the venture capital and the capital market in Australia is, Korea is also seeing a significant increase in this market. We have seen, for example, in the past 10 years, almost a 241% growth in investments in startups and deep tech entrepreneurs, and also over 30% of increase in investments made in companies. Another interesting aspect is that I personally am getting a lot of requests, actually almost daily, on sourcing overseas-based startups that are enter the Korean market. So I think the entry the Korean market, I would like you to probably explore the potential of acquiring or securing investment from Korean venture capitals along with your market. And of course, Born to Global Center and myself, we are here to assist you in that if needed. In terms of the investment sector, as they look very obvious, obviously the largest sectors that are receiving investment from the venture capital industry are in ICT and biomedical, followed by logistics, service, and other areas. Of course, the government, we want to see more growth in our key focal technology sectors, which we have dubbed as DNA or data, network, and AI. So the government for the past year and for the next few years, we're going to invest significantly in data, network, and AI ecosystem. So if you're a company that, and I don't think it's very easy to find any company that does not deal with data, network, or AI, you are bound to receive or see significant more public sector and private sector investments in these sectors in the Korean market. So for those of you who have not really heard too much about the Board to Global Center, I just want to give you a very brief introduction of what we do and what kind of services that we can provide. We are a government-based agency, government-affiliated agency under the Ministry of Science and ICT. We're not a very old organization. We're about 7 years old, and we're located in Pangyo Startup Campus, which is one of the largest startup campuses here in Korea. One of our key characteristics is that differently from other government agencies that we work with companies, early stage companies or startups here, number one, we work primarily with startups or companies with deep tech. Science and ICT components. Number two, we only focus on global collaboration and expansion of companies. We don't really work with startups that are looking to grow in the domestic market, but only focus on those that are looking to collaborate globally. This means that we are also very interested. We have been talking with the Australian Chamber as well as AustCham in how we can collaborate and assist in the entry of other countries' startups and companies into Korea. And last but not least, we say startups, but for us, a startup is a non-listed company. So any company that is not listed in the stock market, they are classified as a startup and they are eligible to receive our support. So in terms of support, we provide all kinds of consulting, capacity building services, including, for example, in-house lawyers, patent attorneys, accountants, investment marketing specialists that are here to provide Korean companies in expanding to the overseas markets. But I'm sure that we can apply this, reapply this to other companies, Australian companies that are entering the Korean market. So these are the array of consulting areas that we provide, from legal, patent, accounting, marketing to PR. We also have a product market fit program. A lot of Korean companies have enjoyed this over the years, as it is an opportunity to basically, as the word PMF says, product market fit test your solution and product. So if you have a product and you want to enter the Australian market, we tell them, look, let us do a 6-month preliminary test or preliminary study with the company. We work with local consulting companies in Australia to provide market validation, potential customer identification for the companies. And I think we can reapply this again to the Australian companies. For those of you who are entering or exploring the Korean market, I think we can redesign this to assist in your entry into the Korean and Asian markets. We also have developed a BootX program, basically early stage boot camp for very, very small startups, early stage startups, 3 to 4 people that have decided that they are going to target the global market from the very establishment stage. So this is a program that we have seen a very, very rapid increase in the number of companies applying and being the beneficiaries of this program. A lot of tech matching. We have been working with global corporations, linking them with Korean startups. And of course, I'm sure that we will provide the similar services of linking overseas startups with Korean corporations in the process. We have seen actually significant success in terms of linking these larger companies, especially in the 5G sector, because Korea has been the first in the world to deploy 5G services. The startups or the smaller companies that have applied their solutions in the 5G services are now being picked up through, of course, our GSMA network with other global 5G or so I think that's another area that we can explore over the years. So over the past 7 years, we have been attracting investment, helping startups, providing consulting, overseas corporations, and so on. And as you can imagine, our core members are usually in AI, machine learning, big data, IoT, health tech, fintech, digital health, SaaS cybersecurity. So if you are a CEO or if you're working in one of these areas, startups outside of Australia or Korea, do reach out to us. I'm sure that we can find you a tech matching based partner or a business model based partner, so that they can we can work together in expanding or exploring the potential of entering the Korean and the Asian market. With COVID-19, things have become a little bit more challenging as we are sitting here online as well. But we have found a solution, and we think that that solution is the formation of collaborative R&D and the creation of joint ventures between early stage companies and startups. We've tried an experiment actually for the past 7-8 months, where we try to create joint ventures remotely between Korean startups and Latin American startups. And we have succeeded in creating 5 actual partnerships between these companies. So, we think that this kind of model of creating these joint ventures can be further expanded, not just between Korea and Latin America, but obviously between partner countries like Korea and Australia. We are also talking with the World Bank, where we believe that these global startups and the local startup in each of the countries should go on to form more joint ventures that can have the local presence in providing global development projects. I think, going forward, the focus on keywords like ESG and green and climate, we all need more local presence. And the only way that we can ensure that is through these joint partnerships and ventures. So the Born Global Center is very actively looking forward to forming and assisting the formation of these joint ventures or partnerships, either outside of Korea or other companies coming into Korea with our local startups. And then that's where really the Australia-Korea bilateral collaboration idea that we've been discussing before. So as I was mentioning, we think that this collaborative approach is critical to tackle our development challenges, especially in the post-COVID era, and also ensure the transfer of technology and knowledge. So the model that we are devising is where we would assist in the formation of the joint ventures or partnerships between deep tech companies of Korea and Australia, and eventually establishing a fund or different types of grants and attracting investors, so that these joint ventures, whether they are formed here in Korea or in Australia, can receive that public and private sector financing and support and growing to participate in global projects. From the Korean side, for those of you, especially Australian companies or other companies that are looking to expand into Korea or working with Korean companies to expand to other countries, please do approach us. We have a joint venture support grant. It is not large, but it's around $100,000 that we can use. That you can use the joint venture for the establishment of joint venture entities or partnership corporations in other countries outside of Korea. So I think that will maybe be a small assistance or grant in helping kind of that awesome partnership. So going forward, the Born Global Center is here. We are focused on collaborative R&D between startups and companies in different countries. We will continue to work with the local ecosystem players to promote the startup ecosystem and, of course, contribute to the sustainable development in our partner countries. So that's what I had prepared. Hopefully, I have been able to share, during that short period of time, just a very brief overview of the Korean startup ecosystem, the tech ecosystem, and how we are planning to collaborate in terms of tech companies and between the tech companies here today, and of course, those of you attending us. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Sokjin. Some fascinating stuff in there, and I think you could probably have talked for over an hour to cover some of the things, but it's really exciting to hear some of the initiatives, especially some of the joint ventures. So people will have an opportunity again to ask you some questions in the Q&A period, but we'll just move on to our third and final presenter now, which is William Choi. He's a tech entrepreneur. He's a speaker and advisor to high growth companies, and most recently the founder and CEO of Posture 360, which is a SaaS platform, software as a service. Is that right? I always get SaaS.
Yeah, that's correct.
Platform that relieves back pain.
Part of it.
part of it, with sensors embedded into posture correcting products. I think we can all do with some of that at the moment with all the remote working and strange ways that we're sitting. But anyway, with 2 successful exits and having led investments and teams in several startups ranging from retail to AI, he's received several innovation awards and has been recognised for his achievements. And he's going to share some of his insights now. So welcome, William, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much. Well, I just want to reiterate on what Sokjin was talking about in Born to Global. We're actually one of the recipients of that very innovative program, where we're actually we're approved. Posture Australia, 360 Australia was actually which is the company that I founded, where we're taking advantage of the Korean grant so that we could spend that in Australia for the purposes of expanding our market and sales in Australia, as well as not hire, but to make sure that we could be effective in what we're doing with our staff and our team over there. And so, yeah, I'm one of the recipients of it. So I just want to say that it is quite effective. Hopefully, we'll be able to get use of it soon. I know that I have to give a couple more documents to get that moving. Thank you very much. My name is William Choi. I am the founder and CEO of Posture 360. I'll take you through just maybe about 2-3 minutes, just introducing the business before I sort of go into and dive into sort of the 5 key drivers about expanding in Korea. And so, just as Joe was mentioning, is that we've developed a SaaS platform that prevents back pain through sensors that are embedded into posture correcting products to help relieve and prevent people of pain. So I've been an entrepreneur. I'm a back pain sufferer myself. I was one of the early investors and became managing director of Backdoor Orthotics, which is a US-based company. We were backed by the founders at Crocs. And then I led Backdoor, created #1 in Asia in terms of sales. We became the fastest growing company, sold over 4 million units. And during that time, I just saw this massive gap in the market where I thought that why don't we take these really great posture correcting products and, being in Korea, being surrounded by tech and all this great hardware, why don't we put sensors into these products so that now users are able to become more aware of their good and bad posture throughout the day. And so, as you know, back pain is a big problem. It is the #1 cause of disability in the world. 3 in 5 children now suffer from it. Of course, the pandemic probably accelerated that in adults as well. And being in Korea, sort of, I was able to have access to a lot of relationships and material, because as Korea is a leading supplier of semiconductors, it was very helpful to be here and to be able to get our hands on those materials. Because as you know, or if you don't know, there's a massive global shortage. And just being able to build those relationships here for Australian business so that we could expand globally was actually very beneficial for Posture 360 as a company. And so how we're solving this is that we've developed a smart posture shirt. And that smart posture shirt, basically what it does, it pulls your shoulders back, corrects your posture, and it's scientifically ergonomically built that way, very comfortable to wear. And we've embedded a sensor into it so that now users are able to become, it comes with a reminder, but it also helps you understand your good and bad posture, every second of every minute of every day. And so we've basically built this all-in-one solution where we have developed a posture correcting product through the apparel and through physical sensor alerts, and that gives you a gentle vibration when you're in bad posture that's connected to a mobile app that monitors and tracks. And then later on, as the data starts to collect, starts giving you customized exercises for throughout the day, so that, as you know, that, people are very different in terms of how they work. So you have office workers and you have truck drivers and occupational health. And all of that data is then uploaded into our secured SaaS platform that we call Posture Live, and where now industry users such as insurance companies, sports managers, and corporate wellness programs are able to analyze and as well as help their employees get better. And so just for the sake of time, I didn't want to get too much into this, but I think if anything, one of if you're going to take anything away from this is about the Korean market, if you want to get into the Korean market, is really is that one word, patience. And I'm saying this is because it's not much about the market, because once you enter into the market, it actually accelerates quite quickly. But what I mean is that Korea could be quite frustrating at times, but I think that's just a result of any country that you're in. But Korea in particular have very specific and very particular consumers. And that's why a lot of companies come into Korea in order to expand outside of Korea and use Korea as a test market because of the of not only the rapid success, but the fact that the matter is that, you know, with the highly densely population that we have here on a very small peninsula, the viral growth of any product and service is actually quite substantial. But one of the issues is that where, you know, I've had this issue between, you know, when I'm talking to management in the US and Australia, where, you know, they don't want to spend a lot of money on the marketing up front. But in Korea, you really have to do that. If you're committed to the market here in Korea and you really want to penetrate the market, you've really got to spend the marketing first. The CapEx is actually quite heavy, but the reward in terms of the hockey stick growth is very substantial. And again, it's because of that high dense population, and as well as Korea is so innovative, everybody just wants to get the new thing. And so when you see your friend that has the new thing, I want it too. And so and they act on that very quickly. So that word of mouth travels very, very fast. And so you want to make sure that when you introduce anything that's new, you want to get in there quickly. You want to be able to capitalize on that quickly so that you could really realize that massive growth. If you're thinking about being a little bit conservative on the marketing side, then you really need to rethink your strategy. Perhaps you could find a partner, a really good partner that could spend that money as long as you give them a good deal. And in the case of my previous company that I was managing director and an early founding member of Backjoy, I had a lot of issues where they wouldn't spend anything, because in the US, it's almost like, and I would say probably Australia as well, is, you know, build that revenue and then you can spend, you know, that budget in the marketing. That's just not the case here in Korea. You really need to, if you're committed to the market here in Korea, you want to be able to spend on the marketing, captivate the audience, and do it quickly. Because if you sort of are on the conservative side, you just want to test it and just kind of dabble in it, that newness is going to disappear right away. And once it's online, if you want to re-enter through another partner, or you've learned something in Korea and you just want to pivot a little bit, it becomes old, because as you know, Korea is very connected. And so when they do research, when they plug into Naver, the search engine, they see the product, oh, it was already released a year ago, but now, you know, they're talking about now, so that's already old. And so you want to be mindful of that. The other thing too is government regulations, and I call this being very business centric. Is that in Korea, the unfortunate thing is that sure, things move very rapidly in Korea, new things catch on very quickly, but that goes along with government regulations as well. So it changes very fast, and you don't want to be caught. You don't want to be stuck in that situation, because you could almost lose the business almost overnight, and that's been the case with Uber. That's been the case with these new shared scooter companies that are coming in. The governments, I don't know whether they've announced yet the new regulations on that. So when they see something that's new and that sort of wasn't in the landscape or the eye of the government, then they'll want to attach regulations to that. So you want to make sure that in order to de-risk your business, you want to make sure that, you know, if you have a certain product or service that it's not so much affected by government regulations, or if it is affected by government regulations, you want to make sure that you're very on top of that, absolutely, and build those relationships through the chamber, you know, that could help you lobby, you know, to the government as well, so that you know, your company is also visible prior to being reactive and trying to lobby when the government is already on the move in changing the regulations that might not work in your favor. The other thing too is you know, as a CEO and a founder and hiring Korean staff, is that it's very difficult to let people go, to speak very frankly. It's the labor law here is very ironclad, and so you want to make sure that you have the right people on board. And I know that's the case with everything, but especially if you want to build that presence in Korea, and if you plan to hire staff and you want to establish an office here, you want to make sure that you understand understand the labor law very well, and then study it to make sure that you don't get caught off guard when you open up an office here. And so usually what I see is trying to find a really good partner, a partner company. And the other thing that I should probably mention is that when you seek that partner company, don't be afraid to ask for details about that plan. Because like I said before, marketing is extremely important, and you want to make sure that you hit it very quickly and fast and furious in the beginning. That's just the way Koreans are. They're very impatient. They like to see things, wow, in front of their face. And so you want to make sure that that partner is willing to spend the money. So, and Koreans are also very detailed, and they can be very organized in terms of the planning, but you have to request it. And so make sure that the partner is willing to spend the money, is willing to do the work, and not just being one of those products within their portfolio, and that they're very excited about it and they genuinely want to take it. And usually that is one of the flags that you could see, is that how much are they going to spend in order to achieve a certain amount of revenue. And you want to ask for that upfront and for the first 6 months, okay? And make sure that they stick with it and keep that into the agreement as well. The other one is cultural understanding. Now, I know that this is an issue with everywhere, right? But for the purposes of being in Korea and myself having raised equal amount of funding both in Korea from investors as well as Australian investors, there tends to be a lot of misunderstanding about why is Korea like this, and then for example, like why are the regulations like this? For example, I tried to get the funding in, and there was it was quite a large amount of investment that was coming in from Australia in order to support our operations here, and it just the amount of paperwork was just incredibly tedious, and that's not just for the case of that. There's going to be other cases that come up in terms of anything to do with financial as well as regulatory things that happen, and then you have on the the Koreans saying, why are the Australians so slow? And then so it's sort of, so Korea's, you're faced with sort of these regulatory issues and red tape, and then and on the Australian side, don't move as fast as the Koreans do, and so there always has to be you have to be that sort of that bridge between the two, and you'll find yourself repeating yourself constantly, and don't be frustrated by that. It's just that Australia, you want your people to understand each other, right, and to understand why Korea is like this. And then I get the same questions over and over and over again, and the key thing is just repeat what you said last week, and the same thing on the Korean side. And just by doing that will really help ease sort of like any sort of tensions that are between the directors or between the team members as well. And so and so when I hold these board meetings or management meetings, there always tends to be that, and just to be mindful that you are that person. You have to be that person, and not only that, but you also increase your value in the company by really being patient, being repetitive, and just trying to communicate the best you can as to why in certain situations it's like this. And the other one is obviously language. Now, again, that's a very obvious thing, but for this purpose, I found that with our Korean staff, where I would say our Australian team tends to be a lot more proactive. And so when you ask them things, when there are deliverables that need to be met, the sense of responsibility, whereas in Korea, you're the boss, you're the guy on the ship. And a lot of times when you ask them to do something and you ask whether they understand, they'll say yes. And then 2 weeks later, you said, okay, has this been done? and it hasn't been done. It hasn't moved. And it's not a matter of that they were lazy. It's just that they didn't understand. And you're wondering, why didn't they ask me? The frustration is that why didn't they just ask me whether they didn't understand? Well, it's they don't want to offend you. And so these type of sensitive things that could actually be very important to understand could actually accelerate the business a lot faster. But if you just sort of have your own way of thinking and thinking that this is going to move forward the way that you thought, it just doesn't happen that way. And so you want to build a really great culture. And what I found even just this morning, just between our, I was on a call with our logistics and digital marketing team between both sides today. It went very well. But I mean, again, we're just starting that, and of course, me being able to insert myself and be that sort of translator, but at the same time, you want to be able to be that bridge, right? And I always found, just even after this team call, one of my staff came and says, my English, I didn't understand what was going on. And I said, well, that's not your job, we're all here to work together. And so you want to make sure that, get them on the call a lot, even if they don't understand. And you're the captain of the ship, and so you want to make sure that you lead that conversation, making sure that everybody's on board, and then as well as helping each other to understand each other is really something that will go a long way. Because what ends up happening is that they start to work off of each other's strengths and weaknesses, and then they help each other, right? And it's exciting, when you deal with cross-cultural teams, it's very exciting and you can't look at it as a burden. You can't look at it as half empty. You've got to look at it as half full, and you want to make it full. And the way that you can do that is to really bring everyone together and not be frustrated yourself. I mean, sometimes there might be some tensions, there might be some frustrations and misunderstandings, and that's something that you just have to learn to navigate with. And that's what we've been able to do. And the other thing too, as well, is when I'm talking about leverage. I found that it's very, very powerful, where our Australian, the parent company, where we spend a lot of our operational and our designs and here in Korea, which is really very, very powerful in a sense. Like I mentioned before, being here and building those relationships with your manufacturers is very key, and you're able to gain and get your product into the best possible way that you want to see in terms of the design and functionality and all of it, and even access, and not having to deal with MOQs. And being here is actually, that's become one of our superpowers. And even when we talk to investors or when we talk to our buyers and potential buyers and potential customers, mind you, the question is always now is are you able to fulfill these orders? And very confidently, I could say yes, based on these timelines. And it's because the power of being able to have access to the hardware here is very powerful, and as well as having our Australia team really English speaking is really important, and and elevate that where we could go global and really be able to message that to the global audience. And so I know that time is short, so
sorry, William. We've only got a few more minutes left for Q&A.
Sure,
so
sure.
I didn't want to wind you up, because I'm I'm learning a lot, and I'm really enjoying your sharing your insights. I think you could host a whole webinar just sharing some of your knowledge and insights on this stuff, because it's actually really I'm learning, as I said, learning a lot, and I think you've got amazing insights into how to actually get a startup or tech and work together across 2 or more countries and be successful in Korea, which we know is quite a challenge. So sorry to have to cut you off.
Not at all.
But I know there's lots of questions coming through, and a couple of the panelists can stay after. So for those of you who are happy to stay on, we will go past 1:30. I probably do need to exit not long after, but we'll hopefully hand over the reins to somebody else who can finish the Q&A moderation. So there are a couple of questions that have come through in the Q&A here on Zoom, but there were a couple of sent through questions first that we want to make sure we answer, given people took the time to ask the questions. So I guess this might be more Sokjin and Craig. We received a question in regards to trade barriers and doing business in Korea. So do you have any insights on the major challenges that your clients or program participants have faced in entering the Korean market at all? It could be related to trade or other factors. And I know, Craig, you talked about some of those factors, but what other big barriers do you see to entry here?
Sokjin, maybe you can go first, by all means.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, thank you. Well, I mean, I think William put it out really nicely in terms of what are the key ways to address those challenges of entering another market. I've actually been working in the actual field. I just want to give you an example. Technological barriers, technical barriers to trade have always been there. And now regulation, especially in the areas of, fintech, AI, data, cloud, they are becoming larger and larger. In Korea, it's certainly not an exception. There was a pre-unicorn company from Korea that does AI-based learning. So they recently received a significant amount of investment from VC funds, and they wanted to enter other markets, Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, and all of them had different regulatory barriers to online learning. And the only way and they actually did enter all three markets, and that was with joint ventures or joint partners that William briefly mentioned. We think that in the past, the trade mechanism was where the government or the people tried to solve these problems, addressing them. But when it gets to things like data and AI, it becomes very difficult because it's tied to the national agenda and national regulations. And that's why we try to route them and support them through by finding very, very viable and trustworthy local partner companies that can take that solution and localize it and keep in mind the local regulatory framework. Right?
Yeah, and so I would point to, thank you, Mr. Chang, and I'd point to what I did say. I mean, I know we've got a lack of time, so I'm not going to repeat what we said about those 5 items of, language, knowledge of the tax system, etc. I think they're key. But I'd also point people to the from the Australian side to the Department of Foreign Affairs, the CAFTA documentation there, because the actual barriers, trade barriers, are relatively low from that the free trade agreement. So the rest of it is around, as you say, regulations, etc., and then getting through those cultural and other norms between the countries, which William did a great job, and of course Sokjin as well. So I'd leave it at that.
Great, thank you, Craig. And I think your website probably has a few things on there as well that we can look at. Now I am going to have to exit, but Rowan is going to ably take over the rest of the Q&A session. So on a high note, I'll ask the next question that came through before I go, which was more for William and Sokjin probably, which is around, do you see any opportunities for health coaching via WellTech platforms in Korea? So is there any opportunities that you see for that sort of industry in Korea? So I think it's a William and or Sokjin to answer that one. And thank you all for having me, and apologies that I have to leave. Thanks.
Sure, I could sort of give you my, absolutely. Right now, health is booming worldwide, obviously, and that doesn't exclude Korea. And Korea, because it's so tech savvy, they're very particular, they're very demanding. And to be able to have that customization of one-to-one is going to be very, and the one that could do it right and penetrate very quickly is going to be very successful here. So absolutely, there's a massive opportunity. It's the way how you're going to market it and make sure that you know your partner is going to do the job, or you have enough budget to be able to market to whether it's very specific or whether it's to the masses. Just make sure that you're very specific in terms of what you want and how you want to market it.
Of course, William being the expert, I'm not going to talk too much, but I'm going to mention that Korea, with the ICT infrastructure and everything else that people talk about, we are also one of the world's fastest aging populations. So that's going to be another keyword in bringing those companies here. Again, we are here to lead you this journey between health tech and health tech, but health tech and education, or health tech and mobility. So that's where we play the role, and we are here to assist in
Fantastic. Thank you. We've got a question here for Craig. Have you seen a post-COVID shift in strategies adopted by companies to expand globally? Obviously, the old preference for sending staff to visit new markets and physically meet with potential partners has been on hold for almost 2 years. Have you seen a major spike in remote technology, such as the services offered by Globalization Partners? And how do you see this trend changing into the future?
Yeah, thanks, Rowan. And actually, that's a terrific question. And I'd be surprised if anyone on this call hasn't actually been impacted by this issue. I was talking to a partner just recently who had described how they'd spent 2 years trying to establish entities in 5 different Asian countries, flying back and forth from Melbourne every single week, coming back on the weekend, just to try and establish those entities to then put one employee in place. And we definitely see a movement to remote work, and a movement very likely to have a hybrid approach to work going forward. So if that's what's happening, then we also see a very strong movement from outsourcing for labour arbitrage, or going offshore for labour arbitrage, and actually going offshore to find the best person. It's almost like a democratization of capability. Employers want to find that right resource in a constrained market, and wherever that is, they'll go and find and establish that. Those people can work remotely. We've all learned to work remotely. And hence, if there's a change, that's what we see. There's been a fantastic spike for our business. Thank you very much. But that's not the issue. The issue here is that change is ongoing, and we can see many companies have said remote is normal going forward. Others who've tried to demand that their employees come back into the office and then see almost like a revolt. So there's something in between where we establish that, I suppose, relationship between employer and employee, and go forward in a way that generates that engagement.
Thanks for that, Craig. Look, we are running out of time. I'll try to sneak in this one last question. And feel free, anyone, to answer this one. It says, so if language barriers are the number one point or pain point for Aussie companies entering the Korean market, is it that they're struggling to find people in Korea who speak good level of business English, or is it Australian companies that don't have the Korean language skills or access to it, or perhaps both? Does anyone want to jump in and try to answer that? It's in the Q&A box.
William, I'm going to suggest that maybe you're a good start, because you've worked between both areas yourself. Right?
Yeah, that is admittedly one of the barriers, or one of my frustration points as well. I mean, it is hard to find bilingual, and if you do here in Korea, they demand quite a steep price for those type of services. But I think what's really important is if you speak a cultural business language, in the sense of that you want to get things done. You want, because really, if you have good rapport, and Koreans understand English better than they think they do, and if you give them that confidence that, hey, I understand what you're saying, and they will even try even harder. And so when you have that sort of dynamic and you establish that sort of relationship, it actually brings you a lot closer. And that communication bit, that level of understanding on the psychology is more important than really the language part of it. That is where you should have the foundation first, and make sure that whatever that you're trying to accomplish as a result, that gets accomplished. That's the first and foremost thing.
Great, thank you. And look,
perhaps just Brian, probably worthwhile just saying that there's a language issue which can be overcome by finding partners or employees, but that's not the only thing. There's also cultural issues that you need to be aware of how to go about business inside that environment. I think, William, that's what you were saying as well. And that's as well important to get the right partners to work with.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And after 8 years of living in Korea, I can probably tick the box to understand a lot about the culture. Language, I'm still struggling on. So I'll keep fighting on that front. Anyway, look, we are well over time now. So I unfortunately need to wrap up. And I do see you have one question there, and we can take that offline. But in thanking everyone, Craig, Sokjin, and William Choi from Born to Global, Globalization Partners, and Posture 360, I do really appreciate your time and insight today. And also to Joe, who was our moderator, unfortunately had to leave a little bit early. But thank you once again. If anyone does have any questions, feel free to send them through. We'd be more than happy to pass them on to our presenters. And stay tuned. AustCham's got plenty of events coming up. It is the 60th anniversary of Australia-Korea diplomatic relationships, so we look forward to hosting some further engaging and insightful events in Q4. Thank you very much, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.